But one of the first things I will ask a family is, how did they learn that their child has Down syndrome? There's a lot of misinformation about Down syndrome. And I think part of that is we have to own this as a medical community. We often view how we care from people about what are the things that are wrong with their body and how do we fix those things that are wrong. And that's a very narrow view. One myth is that people with Down syndrome have a global developmental disability, meaning that every area of their development is below average for the rest of the community. And that's absolutely not true. Actually, we know that most children with Down syndrome actually have social strengths, meaning that they have strengths in being able to read how they interact with others, how they make connections with people, and they have that as a strength that is more advanced than their peers. And if we don't allow them to flourish, then that strength will be taken away. I think something that's unique about my experience, I did a dual training, taking care of both adults and kids. And so I learned the culture of both worlds. So we kind of developed the Healthy Transitions program when I joined the Down syndrome team. The parents and the loved ones would say they could not imagine their life without that person in their life. And they will tell me story after story about how that young adult has been central to their family and actually brought their family together or brought value to their family. Down syndrome is just a piece of who we are, just like all of us. Some of us have brown hair, some of us have black hair. Some of us are tall, some of us are short. Some of us have an extra 21st chromosome. And I think that when we as a society don't view disability as a disease, but rather we view disability as diversity. And when we value all those differences, it actually brings strength to all of us.
The point you made is like a misinformation. That's exactly right. I also read like a lot of parents when they diagnosed with a Down syndrome baby, majority of them choose not to have them.
The question of how do we address some of this misinformation? How do we make sure that actually everybody has all the information they need before they make decisions? I think there's a lot of work that is trying to address that misinformation. A lot of what people do, most of the people, what they do is they live in a community. And a lot of the strengths and resources they get are within their community. There's an organization called NDSS, the National Down Syndrome Society, and they do a lot of national advocacy, and they've created a couple different educational profiles that give families the full information of what a diagnosis of Down syndrome means. I think people often mix up the word inclusion with included, meaning, oh, they're here, they're present. But true inclusion is where we allow people to be present, but also valued. But I would ask, why was text messaging developed? Do you know where text messaging came from?
No.
Text messaging wasn't built for teenagers to be able to communicate at school. It wasn't meant for us as professionals to be at our job in a meeting and being able to get a quick message from someone across the table. It was actually developed for those with hearing impairments so that they could use cellular communication. I would guess that we use text messaging way more than we actually talk on the cell phone now.
Welcome to YINZ Podcast. I'm your host, Envy. And today, our guest is a well-known doctor in Pittsburgh area. He's an associate professor in University of Pittsburgh. He's also a well-known doctor in Children's Hospital, and he specifically serves Down syndrome population. Please welcome Dr. Andrew.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here today. I'm excited to talk a little bit about YINZ Podcast and a little bit about our community.
We have a lot of questions, Andrew. So this would be an introductory to the Pittsburgh area. And would you tell us about your journey into Down syndrome and how it is all started and why you specifically focused, even though you did a pediatric and...
Yeah, so I think my journey into being kind of part of the Down syndrome community is one of two pathways that a lot of people take. So I think that often people end up working within the Down syndrome community because they have a loved one who also has Down syndrome, or they have some exposure that they recognize the beauty and strengths of the community, and that pulls them in. So for me, I actually don't have a loved one who has Down syndrome, but I've grown to love many, many kids and young adults with Down syndrome in our community. My journey is I went to the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine for my medical training, and during that time, I was exposed to our Down Syndrome Center. We have two great other doctors in our Down Syndrome Center, Dr. Velody, who directs our pediatric center, and then Dr. Bulova, who directs our adult center. And when I was in medical school, and then when I did my training in residency, I had the opportunity to work with both of them. And I just had the opportunity to see the work that they did, and it really just drew me in. And I think something that's unique about my experience is that our center is a lifespan center, which means that we take care of individuals with Down syndrome from birth all the way through adulthood. The thing that is unique about my experience is that I'm actually trained in internal medicine and pediatrics. I mean, I did a dual training, taking care of both adults and kids. And so I learned the culture of both worlds, and I learned how things work in both populations. And in our center, while we had a pediatrician and an adult medicine doctor, we did not have someone who was dually trained. And so when I had joined Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh, Dr. Velody invited me in, knowing that I had trained here and knew the community very well. And I joined in to become the teen doctor. And so I uniquely came in to be that transition point, helping our teens and young adults prepare for the adult world. And so we kind of developed the Healthy Transitions program when I joined the Down syndrome team. And so that's kind of a little bit about my journey and how I got pulled in. I think on that journey, what I've learned is that when you meet individuals with Down syndrome, they are not all alike. Every person is unique, like everybody in our culture. And I think that often people come to any group of people who are experiencing challenges, and they see the areas of challenge, meaning the healthcare problems or the academic challenges. But the thing that is unique about the Down syndrome community is, I think, the strengths that our young adults and our kids bring, the way in which they can teach all of us the importance of seeing the value in everybody, recognizing the way in which they connect with other individuals, and the way in which they bring joy to life. And that's the thing that's truly impacted me. I would say I do a lot of different things in my job, but the thing that I love most is working in our center. And it's because the kids and the families that we get a chance to work with.
Yeah, that a lot of information we didn't know about you. And also, can you tell us about the university side of your profile? Like, I went through and looked, and you were doing a lot of research on the vascular side of thing. Like, how that is like related? Is there any relation to Down syndrome? Is
Yeah. So if you look at kind of the jobs that I do, I have initially, if you look and see what my job profile is, I'm hired as a pediatric hospitalist at Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh, which means that my primary job is to take care of children when they are admitted to the hospital, and working with families to help kids get well and help them navigate that challenging course. But like any of us, we all like to have a couple different hats. It's a couple different things that we enjoy doing. One of those is working in the Down Syndrome Center. The other area that I have clinical expertise is in something called vascular anomalies. It's completely unrelated to Down syndrome. It is another challenge that sometimes kids are born with. They're born with abnormal blood vessels, and the Vascular Anomaly Center works to help kids navigate those challenges. Those are kind of the clinical things that I do. The other aspect of some of my work is I do work at the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine, and I'm one of the teaching professors there. I teach on a regular basis our medical students as they're just learning medicine in the first 2 years in the classroom. I do a lot of classroom-based teaching, and then I also run a program called the Community Alliance Program, where we place our medical students in the community working in nonprofits around the city. So that's just a little bit about my job. I do a couple different things in the work that I do.
Yeah. So, Dr. Andrew, like, can you give us like some introductory info about Down syndrome? Because some of us know, but like some of the parents know little about Down syndrome. Can you just like explain a little bit so that our viewers can know about Down syndrome?
Yeah. Thanks for asking that question. I mean, I think so. Whenever I meet a new family, while I'm the teen doctor, I still take care of young children as well, because we have lots of new babies that come into our center, as we've gotten a chance to meet with your family. Um, but one of the first things I will ask a family is how did they learn that their child has Down syndrome? And the reason why I ask that important question is that there's a lot of misinformation about Down syndrome. Often, it is not uncommon that people are told that this is a bad diagnosis. They're given information about that their child will never achieve dreams that they would have, that they will be a burden to the family, and families often come away from that knowledge that their child has Down syndrome as defeated, and aren't given the full picture. And I think part of that is we have to own this as a medical community. I think as a medical community, we take a disease model, which means that we often view how we care from people about what are the things that are wrong with their body and how do we fix those things that are wrong. And that's a very narrow view. And when we think about Down syndrome, often what people will say is, oh, there's heart defects, there's intellectual differences, there may be digestive tract issues, and that this often impacts their life and shortens their life and can be very overwhelming for families. And that's the information we give. But that's actually not the full truth at all. I often say that while Down syndrome is medically a pretty simple diagnosis, it's that someone has an extra chromosome. They specifically have an extra 21st chromosome. And when they have that, their body develops in a different way. And when we think about development, when they develop differently, there can be challenges that occur. Sometimes they have health challenges that need to be addressed right away. And they can be other challenges that kind of go throughout their life as they're learning to walk, learning to talk, and advancing through school. But those challenges are only a piece of the story. Actually, our kids have a lot of strengths as well. As I kind of alluded to, we know that people think, one myth is that people with Down syndrome have a global developmental disability, meaning that every area of their development is below average for the rest of the community. And that's absolutely not true. Actually, we know that most children with Down syndrome actually have social strengths, meaning that they have strengths in being able to read how they interact with others, how they make connections with people, and they have that as a strength that is more advanced than their peers. And so that is not a true statement. There are strengths. The other thing we often think about is that individuals with Down syndrome have a global intellectual disability, meaning that they're behind intellectually all of their peers. That also is not true. Often how we as a society view intelligence is, can you do the things that we expect in school? Reading, doing math, using language skills. And while those may be areas that often some of our kids struggle with, we know that our kids actually have very strong visual memories and very strong visual spatial skills. And so often we don't see some of those other strengths. A great example of this is that it's not an uncommon story that families will tell me that their young adult or even their kid, if they ride in the car with them, they may drive somewhere new for the first time and they will exactly know that path because they visually understood that map in their head. They have this very strong visual spatial strength. So I think it's misinformation to think that we only focus on the challenges. We don't think about the strengths. And the other thing I'll say is that when I meet families, especially our teenagers, and I talk to them, the parents and the loved ones would say they could not imagine their life without that person in their life. And they will tell me story after story about how that young adult has been central to their family and actually brought their family together or brought value to their family. So I think that one of the things I would share is that Down syndrome is just a piece of who we are, just like all of us. Some of us have brown hair, some of us have black hair. Some of us are tall, some of us are short. Some of us have an extra 21st chromosome, and that impacts our life. There are challenges, but there are also a lot of strengths that give value. And I think that when we as a society don't view disability as a disease, but rather we view disability as diversity, meaning the differences we all have as a fabric of our community. And when we value all those differences, it actually brings strength to all of us.
The point you made is like a misinformation. That's exactly right. I also read like a lot of parents when they diagnosed with a Down syndrome baby, majority of them choose not to have them. So, is there anything like as a Down syndrome society or the children's hospital or like how you think like we should address that one? Because like a lot of I've seen a lot of positive things and it's a wonderful joy and all those stuff, and I hear parents saying a lot of good things. So this is one thing like even now like maybe 75 to 80% people choose not to have the Down syndrome. For those parents, what is your suggestion or advice?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I mean, I think that the question of how do we address some of this misinformation? How do we make sure that actually everybody has all the information they need before they make decisions? And I think that there are a couple different ways in which the Down syndrome community, both in Pittsburgh and nationally, are working to address this. Before I jump into that, I would say one of the big lessons I've also learned from working in the Down syndrome community is that often, as healthcare professionals and those who work in the healthcare industry, they work in the silo of healthcare. And that's only a little piece of our life, how we actually get the care we need. But a lot of what people do, most of the people, what they do is they live in a community. And a lot of the strengths and resources they get are within their community. One of the things that I've learned from working within the Down syndrome community is the importance of the healthcare system and the community to come together. One of our largest partners in the Down syndrome community is the Down Syndrome Association of Pittsburgh. That's a family run organization that advocates and serves the Down syndrome community in Western PA. They do a lot of amazing things, but some of the partnerships that they do to make successful is they help fund the Down Syndrome Center. So they let us as healthcare professionals be able to have prolonged visits with our families. The other thing, getting back to how do we do advocacy, is they have a great program called the First Call program, where when we meet families or we hear about someone who has a new prenatal or postnatal diagnosis of Down syndrome, the Down Syndrome Association of Pittsburgh, with the family saying it's okay, we'll make that connection. And the First Co program is a mentorship program where another family with a child less than 5 years of age will come alongside, meet with that family, and tell them about their journey and give them a little bit of support in the process. So that's a very personal touch that allows our families to get information straight from the people who have the most experience, the parents and families that are involved. The other thing that we do as a Down Syndrome Center is we try to educate our community around us. So the Down Syndrome Clinic actually works very closely with the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine. And every first-year class of medical students on the first week of their time at school, so the first few days of school, one of the afternoons is dedicated to learning about Down syndrome and the Down syndrome community. We actually invite a bunch of our families in, and students get to sit in small groups of 6 to 8 students, and meet a family and meet an individual with Down syndrome. And they get to learn about what are the strengths of the community. What does it actually mean to live life with Down syndrome? And it's very enlightening. Our students, when they graduate, will remember that specific experience, and it gives them a broader view. We also invite lots of learners into our clinic. So we have individuals who are training to be genetic counselors, because sometimes they're the ones giving the news for the first time. We invite them into our clinic so they can see what it's like to work with a teenager with Down syndrome and get to learn that broader view. So we do a lot of education within our community locally. But I will also say there's some very big national advocacy as well. There's an organization called NDSS, the National Down Syndrome Society, and they do a lot of national advocacy, and they've created a couple different educational profiles that give families the full information a diagnosis of Down syndrome means. And so if anybody's interested, they can go onto NDSS's website and they can access some of that educational information, which can be really powerful to get into the hands of individuals. So I think there's a lot of work that is trying to address that misinformation. And I think part of it is not only changing the mind, meaning you need to have the right facts, but also changing the heart. There's also a really importance of meeting people, right? When you have relationship, you actually see something more broader than just facts. And so that's why we've done a lot of work to not only give information, but also think about exposure to relationships so that people can actually understand that individuals with Down syndrome are unique like everybody else, and they have strengths and challenges like all of us.
Yeah, there are a couple of things that are really eye-opening, Dr. Andrew. So, one thing you mentioned is university having a program that's really good, and the other thing is like you're also suggesting parents to go and check with the families who already have a Down syndrome kid when they diagnosed with a Down syndrome baby or something, and talk to a few people in the children's hospital, connect with the Down syndrome association in the children's hospital, and that way they can learn more things and not to jump conclusion immediately.
Mm-hmm.
Compared to other conditions such as autism and other spectrum disorders, how is Down syndrome is different?
That's a really great question. I think that often in society, what we do is we think about different experiences that people have and we put them in these boxes and then we compare them to each other. And I would say that my encouragement would be that instead of thinking about how are each of these different disorders different and why do some of them have different strengths, what we should do is focus on what is the value that each of these unique experiences bring to us as a community. So instead of pitting disorders against each other, we should say, what are the strengths that each of these bring? And what we have to recognize, and just to kind of give you an example, and I often talk about this when I'm meeting with young adults and families and thinking about the importance of developing a good transition process, a process of moving to adulthood in a successful way. And I'll say that, everyone who has a disability has something unique about them that we as a society should view as a strength. And if we don't allow them to flourish, then that strength will be taken away from us. So a great example, I have my cell phone here, and even while we're talking, I'm getting text messages, and all of us do this all the time. We get these messages on our phone, and they're nice because someone can reach us at any time, and we send messages back. But I would ask, why was text messaging developed? Do you know where text messaging came from?
No.
Yeah. So we created cell phones, right? It's meant to say, hey, this is an ability to talk to someone on the phone anywhere I'm at. I no longer have to just be at home, stuck to a landline. But text messaging was actually developed for those with hearing impairment. So text messaging wasn't built for teenagers to be able to communicate at school. It wasn't meant for us as professionals to be at our job and a meeting and being able to get a quick message from someone across the table. It was actually developed for those with hearing impairment so that they could use cellular communication as well. The interesting thing is, I would guess that we use text messaging way more than we actually talk on the cell phone now.
Correct.
And the power of that is that when someone said those with hearing impairment need to be valued, they need to be centered, that part that people think of as broken is actually a strength. And when we think about that strength, it actually brings value to all of us as a society. Another example, every time you walk in the grocery store, those doors open automatically.
Correct.
Or every time, you're a young family pushing your stroller down the street and you have to cross across the road, there's a ramp that goes down and a ramp back up. We all are benefiting because of ADA and the importance of centering those with mobility differences. In the same way, we shouldn't be pitting these different kind of groups against each other. What we should say is, what are the strengths of each of these groups? And what I would argue is that what we should be focusing on is inclusion. And inclusion is a word that people use all the time about school. But what I mean is inclusion in a more global sense. I think people often mix up the word inclusion with included, meaning, oh, they're here, they're present. But true inclusion is where we allow people to be present but also valued. So when we value those with Down syndrome, what we can do is actually bring value to all of us. And I want to give you a quick story that kind of shares that picture. And so I met a young man at one of our National Down Syndrome Congresses. He's in his 20s and he has Down syndrome, and he lives down in Alabama. And he graduated high school, and his job now is he works at a law firm. His job in the law firm is he works in the mailroom, and he delivers mail to all the different partners within the practice. He's an individual who has Down syndrome.
Wow.
At the end of the year, the award for the most valuable member of the law firm was this young man. And the reason why is because he knew everybody's name, and he knew their backstory, and he would touch base with them every day, check in personally with them, and he just had this ability to really connect. And that isn't to say everybody with Down syndrome, those are their strengths, but that is generally a strength, that social strength that they have. And because he was included, he was present within the law firm, but also valued for who he was, it changed the culture of that specific law firm, and they saw the value of it. And I think that what we really need to do as a society is think about what is unique about each group of people, and how do we make sure that we're supporting those and validating those so that we can all benefit.
I agree with you. All resources and contact information you can find in our description of this video.